this is part 2 because we didn't quite get through one of my talks which is probably always the case for me. I always overrun, so I'm hoping this isn't going to go to a part 3 and that we really do finish in part 2, so that'd be impressive. But we are, as we say, at the end of 1 Peter, which is a letter. Does anyone know anything about the letter from what we've been studying for the last 2 months? Anything about the letter? Who it's from and who it's to? Anything? From Peter. Brilliant. You've got the safe answer. Yeah. And who was it to? Does anyone remember at all?
A bunch of churches in what's now Turkey.
A bunch of churches in Turkey, that's exactly it. And they were in towns and small places that nobody's probably ever heard of, whatever, and no longer exist, most of them probably. So the church was small back then. It was small, and it was small groups of people. And what was happening? Does anyone remember what was happening in those churches? Persecution. Anything more on that, Therese? Can you say more? Yeah.
Roman persecution.
Roman persecution.
Particularly Gentiles who had been Romans in these churches. So they were feeling the pressure to go back to being Romans, and Peter's encouraging them to carry on being Christians.
Brilliant, yeah. So they were Christians, but some of them would have been new Christians, but they would have come away and stepped away from the culture that would have been predominantly Roman, Greek culture, and they would be stepped away and they would be standing out in their communities because they were now living to a different kind of rule, a different kind of ethic. They were following a person, Jesus, this Jewish person, Jesus, who died and come back to life. And they were living differently from those around them. And that was causing them to stand out. And as a result, they were starting to get pressure. So it was pressure from their neighbours and their families and people around them to go back to the way they were living before or whatever. But Peter's writing to them as an old man at the end of his life. And he's writing to encourage them to say, no, look, remember, you came to know Jesus. And that is who you are following, and to hold fast to him. And as he gets to the end of the letter, he writes this final bit. And it's, as I say, the thing about suffering is, or whether it's persecution or whether it's just any kind of experience where you're feeling that this isn't fair or this isn't unjust, I guess it brings up all of those questions about, and especially if you're trusting in a God that is good, about why is this happening to me? Why is it? When will it ever end? When will it stop? And how can I get so far away from this suffering? And ultimately, where is God in this? If he says he cares about me, where is he in it? And I guess we might experience those. And what was particularly important is these people were there was suffering, because Peter contrasts suffering just because, if I go and steal something from Aldi, I'm going to suffer the consequences of that. And he was contrasting that kind of suffering where, well, that's a natural consequence if you've broken the law, to a suffering where actually you're doing good and yet you're still getting bad results. And you're still getting harassed or treated unfairly or unjustly. And I guess we might have experienced that in our lives. We might understand what that feels like sometimes. And the desire and the press then to act in ways that we might think if they've done it to me, then I should do it back to them then, shouldn't I? If I've been hurt, then I should hurt someone else back. Or it might be that we try and claim justice and we go through the courts and we fight for justice and we fight for our rights. Or it might be that, like I say, we want certainty when actually life is insecure or it's like life feels uncertain, but we want to get back to that place of security. And Peter isn't giving us those reasons. And what he's saying to these people that he's writing to, he's not saying that is where I want you to try and get what you want. He's saying endure it and keep going, trusting in Jesus. And he's saying that actually, all of the time, he's saying, I want to remind you that Jesus is alive and is coming back. And I want to put your hope there. So have a long view of what's going on in your lives. So we're going to just finish on that. As I say, we looked at one character in this last passage, which was Jesus, the Good Shepherd. And it's contrasted in this passage with the devil, who is described as a prowling lion, like a prowling lion. So I'll just bring that passage, and we'll just read this together. And I'll read from the whole of it, which is this whole section, which is, "To the elders among you, I appeal as a fellow elder and as a witness of Christ's sufferings, who also will share in the glory to be revealed. Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, watching over them, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be. Not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve, not lording it over those who are entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. And in the same way, you who are younger, submit yourselves to your elders. All of you clothe yourselves with humility towards one another, because God opposes the proud, but shows favour to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong, firm and steadfast. To him be the power forever and ever. Amen." So as I say, there's two characters that are contrasted in this passage. The first one is the chief shepherd, which we looked at last time. And then the second one that we're going to look at today is this character of the devil, the roaring lion who prowls around. And as I said last time, in terms of just briefly to touch on a couple of things, the shepherd in the ancient world's primary role was to protect from harm the sheep. So that primary responsibility is that's the job of the shepherd. And these Christians were suffering, and he wants to remind them that Jesus has got you. Jesus has got you in the midst of this. And he actually, if we go back, read through the letter, you'll see all the time he's saying, look, this is the pattern. This is the pattern that's happened. Jesus has gone before you. Jesus, who was without sin, who never put a foot wrong, suffered because of it. And he says, this is the pattern of your life. And so he basically says to Peter, and Peter's had this experience himself of when the last time I spoke about it, Peter, I mentioned that Peter 30 years earlier had massively messed up with Jesus. Massively messed up. He denied Jesus just before his death, and he'd rejected him. And he'd massively messed up. And Jesus has this encounter with him after he comes back to life, and he restores him. And not just restores him and says, look, I welcome you back, but actually says, the thing that I spoke to you about going on to do, the call on your life, you're to do it. You're carrying on. Feed my sheep, he says. Feed my sheep. And so Peter is living this out, and what we see is 30 years later he's writing this letter and he's saying, this is how I've lived my whole life. And he's talking about this person of Jesus who he's known his whole life. And there's a guy, 100 years or so after this, a guy called Polycarp, a strange name, but Polycarp was another guy who was martyred for his faith. And basically it's famous because he was killed because of his belief in Jesus, and right at the end of his life I'm just reading a book about him, but right at the end of his life he's this famous for this quote. He says he's asked to deny Jesus, and he can get away with it if he does that, if he just denies Jesus. And he says, for 86 years have I followed Jesus, I'm not going to deny my friend and my master now. And he's so enraptured, so in love with this person, and knows the love of this person that it holds him right to the end, and he faces it and he dies. So the great shepherd, the chief shepherd that holds him, that's Peter all the way through. And it's almost like this is the first time, like I say, he mentions the devil and Satan in this. So he's gone through all of this. He said, you're going through all these difficulties. I want you to resist going back to doing things like, getting revenge and all that sort of thing. I want you to keep going. And it's almost like this is almost the last few lines, and then he mentions the devil. And it's interesting to me because he doesn't put the devil out as if there's God here and there's the devil there and there's this big battle going on between the two of them. He's almost like he's all about Jesus. He's all about Jesus. But then he mentions, almost at the end, he says, look, but also you need to know there is this prowling lion that is around. And it's not like he sets them up as equals, but it's almost like he is trying to get them to be aware and alert to this. But at the same time, it's overshadowed by who Jesus is. It's overshadowed. And I think it's important because some people, I think, can get into overly thinking, overly spiritualising things and overly getting into giving the devil more power than the devil has actually got. But actually, at the same time, we are to be alert to his schemes. But before we get on to that, I just want to pick up on this bit about the middle bit, actually, about anxiety and worry. Before I get on to it, so I just want to mention something around that, really, which is when you are undergoing stuff, that is when anxieties and worries come to the fore. A lot of us struggle with anxiety a lot of the time, but when you are going through difficulties, it tends to up the volume quite a lot. So what I'd like us to do is a little exercise now. We can think of perhaps what anxieties are, but what I'd like us to do is each take a piece of paper. I don't know if you could just pass those out and grab a pen, or then I'll pass out pens. And I want you to just write down what are some of the things that people get anxious and worry about in life. You might think of things, these people, when they're going through really difficult times, but just think about what are the general things that we worry about and we get anxious about. I don't want you to put your names on it. I don't want you to put your names. And just so you're aware, I'm not going to try and identify anyone from their writing or anything. I just want you, and these might not be anxieties that you experience. They might be just friends, family you know, or you're just aware of. But just put down things that, it's helpful to get a bit personal a bit. What do I worry about? What are my concerns? What are the things that stress me out? And like I say, don't put your name on it. Everyone had a go at putting something down. Okay, what I'd like to do now, what does it say to do with our worries and our anxieties in this passage? Cast them all on him. That's what we're asked to do with our worries and our anxieties, because he cares for us. One of the key points in this passage is God cares. He is the great shepherd. He does all of these things care. They're going through persecution, and actually, Therese mentioned that this Roman persecution. We suspect, we're not 100%, that at this point the level of persecution is not at its highest. It's not, but it gets ramped up pretty soon. Pretty soon Christians are going to start getting rounded up, and then all of the stuff we perhaps know about from the Romans and sending them to the lions and stuff like that, that's coming. And Peter in his own life, I don't know if you remember, Peter was told that he was going to die for his faith. He was told he was going to suffer for his faith. So he's in his 60s, something like that now, something around that, and he knows that actually he's got worse to come. As I said last time, he's not going to die in his sleep, he's going to die for his faith. So he's not expecting a rosy end and I, like peaceful, just fall asleep and die. He's expecting some more suffering. But he says, if God cares, cast all of your worries, all of your anxieties on him. So I'd like us to enact that out now, and we're going to see who's good at, and some of you have got a bit more of a challenge, but you can. I'd like to screw up the piece of paper and cast it into the bucket. Have a go. Could I have a couple of, Esther, would you gather the bits of paper that missed the bucket and get them in? Thank you. Oh, a bit of a long shot. Are we all in? Are we all in? Right. Okay. Right. Interesting little point of application there. Some of us need a bit of help. So get those in the bin. And sometimes when we've got anxieties and worries, it's helpful to get other people alongside us. But here's the thing. If it was, who here, when you have that experience of anxiety, thinks it's as simple as you just get rid of it and then it just goes from your mind? Who here has that? Not many of us do we? Most of us, anxiety is a bit more like a thought that goes round and round and round in our heads and keeps going round and keeps going round. It's a troubling thing that causes us great distress. So this casting, though, means it's moved from Isaac to the bin, whatever. It's moved from there to God. And sometimes it's not a case of we just got to do it once. We've got to keep doing it, of casting it on God. And saying, God, it's come back, it's back again. And we've got to keep this active. It's a dynamic keep going of putting my trust in Jesus at this point, trusting he's going to do something with it. And I think it's choosing to do things. There's a couple of active things we need to do. And one of them is this casting is an active thing that we need to choose to do. And we need to be actively doing it. But sometimes I think it helps to see it that actually we are casting it to the creator of the universe. And we sung about those things. Moz mentioned that when we sing that stuff of worship, there's some, it's not that bolsters us up to think, this is, oh God, this is, we need to kind of prop God up in some way. What we are doing is lifting our eyes up to who he truly is. And I think in times of when you're in anxious and worried times, I think one of the things to do is gaze on who God really is. The bigness of God and the fact that he cares about you. And the fact that he cares about you. And then casting can sometimes feel like it's actually landing in the bucket. So the anxiety thing. But like I said, we then go on to this prowling line. And it says, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. I said this is a letter of Peter 30 years on from when he first met Jesus. And there's a scene in Peter's life again, which I think is relevant from 30 years ago, 30 years before this letter, that is probably quite relevant for him in this, because actually he knows something of what it means to have the devil right by him, prowling around, looking for him to be the one to be taken out. And it's a scene in Matthew 16. I don't know if you've your Bibles, but if you turn to Matthew 16, and in Matthew 16, what happens is Jesus is going around, and one of the things he's doing is announcing who he is. He's announcing who he is. And he's asking people, who do you think I am? And Peter, the top marks, he's like, he gets the, he says, you are the Messiah, you're the Messiah of Israel, you are going to be the one. So he gets that totally right. And then not only that, then Jesus says to him, Peter, I'm going to rename you, I'm going to call you the Rock, that's what the name means, Peter, the Rock, I'm going to build, you are going to be this massively important person in the formation of the church. So he gives them a really great commission, a really great mission to do. And he gets the answer right. And then straight after that, he goes and does this, which is Peter's way, really, that this is what he says. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to disciples that he must go on to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests and the teachers of the law, that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. And Peter took him aside and he began to rebuke him. That's a good thing to do, isn't it? Rebuke Jesus. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. And Jesus turned and said to him, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. And then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take us and follow me. So he's had this massive good moment. You're the Messiah. Yes, I'm going to be really important in the forming of your church. And then he makes this statement, which is what? About what? Suffering. That he's talking about in this letter. He's saying, oh, Jesus, you're not going to go that way. You're not going to go the way of suffering. You are Messiah. You're going to use power. You're going to throw the Romans out. You're going to help Israel become great again. He's doing it. No. But Jesus says, no, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to be killed on a cross. And that is how I'm going to achieve my victory. I'm going to be killed on a cross. Through loving people, through suffering for that love, is how I'm going to win people. And that is now, 30 years on, that's what Peter's telling them. He's saying, look, you will keep suffering, you will do that, just like Jesus, you will suffer but this is the victory, is you keep loving, you keep serving, you stay humble, and you keep trusting in God's great plan. It's a complete turnaround. But he knows what Satan's like. He knows what the devil is like. He knows how he prowls around. And I'm just going to finish with 3 ways, tactics, if you like, or schemes of the devil. And it's kind of useful to know that this is the way the devil works. Because the prowling around of a lion is kind of a helpful illustration of what prowls. So if you could just bring up the next slide. I think there are others, but I think these are kind of key ones, I feel. The first one is the wounded. And what I mean by that is when you are going through suffering, when you're going through disappointment, and when you're going through discouragement, there's a massive temptation to doubt that God cares, that God's involved, that God is going to come through. And I think when we go through those stages, that is a good opportunity for a lion. Like a lion looks for wounded animals and preys on them. And I think when we're going through those times, be alert, be sober-minded, because I think actually those are going to be the times when actually the devil is going to come in. So you're going to have, it's almost like at that time, sometimes the way the devil's going to work is a bit like a con trick. It's going to seem like the solutions the devil's got are going to seem like really good. Like a con trick, a good con basically makes you think you are getting something from it. That's the kind of gist of a good con, is when you've won something, or you're going to double your investment or whatever. You're making it out that you're going to get something from it. And when the devil works, one of the things is he's going to lie and he's going to deceive you into thinking that actually there's an easier way to the Christian life. There's an easier way out. That perhaps it isn't that way. Or this thing the way I'm currently feeling now, that I need to respond to that. I need to always go with the way I'm feeling about something. As opposed to, as Jonathan said, we stand on truth. We stand on a reality. And actually how I'm feeling now can sometimes be deceptive and temporary. And it's easy to listen to our hearts that are deceptive and flattering rather than to God's truth. And as I say, sometimes we'll give in to our easy relief or easy way of doing things, because actually resisting evil is really hard and it's really difficult. But also it's believing lies that God said, that the devil says. He says, God doesn't care about you. Or God's holding back from you your best. That's what he used in the Garden of Eden, is God's holding something back from you, your best. And that's the way he'll get in. Or he'll say something like, you're not good enough or gifted enough to do the thing that I've called you to. Well, who said it was about you? God has said this will. So actually trusting in yourself as opposed to trusting in God. You get them all the time on Facebook, these things. You're better off looking after number one, because nobody else will. It's just a little lie. It's just a little lie. You're on your own. Nobody else really cares about you. Did God really say that? I'm suffering, so I must have done something wrong. I mean, that's what these guys are experiencing. They're suffering. Well, maybe we haven't got this right. Maybe we haven't. Well, what he's saying to them is, you've got it exactly right. That's why you're suffering. But I'm saying, in this one, pay careful attention to your thought life. Be sober-minded. Have a battle mindset. And it's really important to spot the deceptions. And sometimes having other people sharing it can be really helpful, because they can see something you can't see in it. And it is sometimes like the devil just kind of picks up one of those little anxieties you've got, and it's one of those, and he just brings it back. It's your health, it's your family, it's money, it's your job, it's whatever it is. And he just picks it up and he'll put that back in, whatever. And we need to just keep coming back to casting it back on Jesus. And the trick, really, to spot a lie is to know the truth. It's a common thing around how they train people to know genuine notes, is they get them to know what a genuine £10 note looks like. So in order to spot a forgery, you absolutely know, you know the field, you know everything about it. So if you want to spot lies in your life, if you want to spot those little deceptions of the devil, then know truth, know the Bible really well. Because that's how you're going to spot a lie. And the second one is the distant, those on the edge of the flock. That's the other thing the prowling lion looks for. Not the crowd together around the shepherd, but the one that's just off to the side, the one that's separated out a little bit. The one that's distanced themselves because they're going through a hard time. And nobody's really going to be bothered with me again. I'm always going on about how I'm struggling. But no, that's what the devil wants. The devil wants you out to the side. But Jesus wants you with him and with his flock. And so the one way is to be distant. But I think there's even a danger with that. There's the distance of people that haven't been coming to things and stuff like that. But I think there's a distance you can have where you're physically present in the room, but actually you're emotionally distant, and keep people at arm's length, keep God at arm's length, keep others from arm's length. So I think there's even a danger, actually, that's a bit more, you're still separate, you're still distant from the flock, and that is a way, that is prowling grounds for the lion. And there's a good quote I read, which was this: what is hidden from Jesus is in the sights of the devil, and what is kept out of Jesus' reach is in easy reach of the devil. Jesus put you in a church family for a reason. He calls us to be part of a church family for a reason, so that we aren't distant, so that we're in with the flock. We're in to encourage one another, to spot the lies of one another, to help us when we're wounded, when we're struggling. And then the final one is the distracted sheep. And this is another quote from a guy I was reading on all of this, and it says this: Satan loves to sail with the wind and to suit our temptations to their conditions and inclinations. What it means is he'll use our weaknesses and our interests and our own nature as his hunting ground. So if we're prone to anxious thoughts, he's going to use that. If we're prone to be hot-headed and passionate, he'll use that to allow us to fall into judging and bitterness towards others. If we're easily offended, he'll use our pride. If we're easily distracted on the next new fad, the next thing, he'll use that. He'll use our passions and our interests, and he'll draw us to these things, and they'll become our idols. Even the things that might seem spiritual or seem harmless. And there's a book by C.S. Lewis called The Screwtape Letters, which I don't know if some of you might have read. He's just very good on this, to read through and think actually how easily. You don't need to defeat if you can distract. In the Second World War, they dropped dummy parachutes with dummies down to draw the enemy away from the real front line or whatever. You don't need to defeat an army if you can just distract them enough. And your distractions will be your thing. I brought a few of mine in here. I love playing games. I'm really into playing board games. I love reading. I love my tablet and watching TV shows or whatever. I bought my gaffer tape because I'm in my element when I'm repairing tents and things like that. But do you know what I mean? It could be anything that is your interest or your distraction, whatever. But the point about it is, that's all he needs to do. Just keep filling you up. And I think in the modern Western world, man, we've got to fight for a life of simplicity and discipline with all of the attractions that we've got. Man, we don't even need them all in these separate things. This thing pretty much does all of that, apart from keep you dry. But it does everything else. It entertains you in so many different ways. And the other way is just to say, small sins that hardly seem problematic, little white lies, little things that we do, small compromises, that little look of lust or whatever, they can all cause a problem. It's like a pebble in a shoe, that just a little stone in a shoe over a long distance just works its way and does its damage, or a small leak on a boat will sink a boat in the end. So how do we steer clear of the prowling lion? Well, the final verses are these: resist him, the prowling lion, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong and firm and steadfast. To him be the power forever and ever. Amen. He comes back, and Moz said this a good few weeks ago. You read through 1 Peter, it's not rocket science. It doesn't need a lot of explanation, but it does need to be well read and read often, I think. It's not difficult stuff. Stand fast in Jesus and keep standing with others who are also going through the same kind of trials. We belong to a great shepherd and our lives matter to him. And it's a simple truth. And I don't know what your biggest challenge this week will be. It might be your mental health, like I said. It might be you're juggling home, family, just even getting out of bed. It might be negative thoughts. It might be that your week was a great week. Or it may be your week where the thing you feared has come upon you. But it's important to remember that God has shown he cares for you first and foremost in sending his Son. That is the declaration of the Bible throughout, is that Jesus has come and Jesus is the great shepherd and Jesus is the one that we can put our trust in and know that whatever befalls us, as Christians, that actually nothing can really harm us, nothing can touch us. We hope we have an eternal glory. That word glory, I said the word suffering crops up again and again in in 1 Peter, but so does the word glory, 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 glory. We have an expectation of something greater and better. So know the devil's schemes, but don't become over-obsessed with the devil that you lose sight of the great shepherd who has won the victory. There's a wonderful thing that I'm going to finish, which is Revelation 5, which basically is, there is a lion that is greater than this prowling lion, and that is Jesus, and he's called the Lion of Judah. And we're just going to finish with that. And we won't, because of time. I could have done this in 3, I think. But because of time, we won't finish with a song. But I'm just going to read this. And as I read this, I just want to remember, this is the future. This is what will happen. Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven and on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. And I wept and I wept, because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." And then I saw a lamb, looking as if it had been slain, standing at the centre of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. And the lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, sent into all the earth. And he went and he took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. And when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, and each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which were the prayers of God's people. And they sang a new song, saying, "You are worthy to take the scroll and open its seals, because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation, and you have made them to be a kingdom and a priest to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth." And then I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels, numbering hundreds and thousands, and 10,000 times 10,000. And they encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders. And in a loud voice they were saying, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power, wealth, wisdom, strength, and honour, and glory, and praise." That is the end. That is the future. We have a great shepherd who has won a victory on the cross through suffering. That is what 1 Peter is all about. And if we want to be victorious with him and hold fast, that's all we need to do, is stand fast under his grace, under trusting in what Jesus has done at the cross. We stay close to the shepherd. We stay close to his flock. And all of this is about staying low or getting low with him. Pride is the thing that will kill us or whatever. If we think we can go it alone, if we think we don't need him, but staying low and getting low, getting on our knees before him and trusting in him and what he has achieved. Amen.